9, we learn about the jussives and imperatives. Both of these are different conjugations. These conjugations express commands or wishes. Let's start with the jussive. Our authors tell us the jussive is similar in form to the imperfect. By this, they mean the jussive will oftentimes look identical to the imperfect. There are a couple of exceptions to that, which we will look at. The jussive expresses both positive and negative commands or wishes. The jussive is always negated with all. Lo never precedes a jussive. It's nice to say never in Hebrew, and this time it's true. Lo never negates a jussive. So the jussive conjugation expresses a command or wish. Let's look at some examples from Genesis 16, verse 5. Yeshpot Adonai beini uvenecha. May the Lord judge between me and between you. So Yishpot here is a jussive. Let's look at another example from Psalm 102, verse 3. Al taster panecha mimeni. Do not hide your face from me. Notice the negation here is all, negating the jussive. The jussive forms are identical to the imperfect forms with two exceptions. So first off, I'll say that oftentimes it's impossible to tell the difference between a jussive and an imperfect. They look exactly the same oftentimes. So it's only based on context that we are able to tell if it should be translated as a command or wish, or if it should be simply translated as an imperfect. The two exceptions to this are the first person jussive forms. Sometimes these are called cohortatives. These often end with ah. Another use of the he here gets attached to the end of an imperfect in the first person to turn it into jussive. This occurs in all binyanim. Let's take a look at an example from the call. The first common singular in the jussive is spelled eshmara. This ah ending is added on to turn it into a command or a wish. The first common plural, nishmara. The ah is added on again to make it a jussive to tell us that it's a command or a wish. Typically, in the imperfect, these do not have anything on the end, so this ah ending adds to the meaning of the imperfect. It adds it and makes it into a command or wish. The second exception to the rule that the jussive looks identical to the imperfect is found in the second and third person jussive forms, in the hifil, and in some weak verbs. So some verbs that are spelled with our weak letters will have a peculiar spelling, as does the hifil in the second and third persons. So sometimes these verbs have a different vowel than the imperfect in the second syllable. A couple of examples. Yamlek. This is our jussive. Let him make someone king. The imperfect is yamlik. So here we have the tsere, here are the hirik yod. The jussive has shortened the vowel from the hirik yod to its tsere. Here we have the jussive form of kum. Yakom, let him stand up. And the imperfect is yakum. Again, the vowel has been shortened. The jussive likes to shorten its vowels. So that's what we're seeing. The difference between the imperfect and the jussive in the second and third person is the shortening of that vowel. So the things that we need to really pay attention to are that the jussive is built off of the imperfects. It almost always looks the same. In the first person, both in the singular and the plural, the ah is ended onto the end in order to add the jussive sense, the command or wish. And then sometimes in the second and third person, especially in the hifil and in some weak verbs, our vowel is shortened after the second root letter. The imperative is similar in that it expresses a command or wish. However, the imperative only occurs in the second person, and it only expresses positive commands or wishes. It cannot express a negative command. Therefore, we'll never see a negation before it. Neither lo or all or any of the other negations will appear before an imperative. So let's take a look at an example from Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9. Shamor nafshecha ma'od, guard your soul or your life very much. So here we have the imperative. It is a command, a positive command, something that we should do. And the imperative, I remember this simply because it is imperative that we follow the command. So this is helpful, I think, as we try to remember what the imperative does. The form of the imperative is identical to the jussive minus the prefix. That is also to say that the imperative is basically identical to the imperfect, except sometimes the vowel is shortened in the imperative just like in the jussive. So the imperative is going to look exactly like what we find in the imperfect, except for there will be no prefix on the front. Let's take a look at the chart. So here we have a number of different binyanim, the ones that we have learned. Here's the call of the imperative. Shamor, shimri, shimru, and shemorna. So you might remember the yatatata, yatatata, I, una. Here we have the I, U, and na, but the yatatata, yatatana have been removed from the front. And that's how you form the imperative, is by using the imperfect, taking the stuff off of the front. Let's take a look at the nifal. The nifal does something interesting. We take the noon off of the front, we take the imperfect form off of the front, so the yod and the tavs off of the front, and a hey appears in the nifal. So the hey appears and the noon is found as a doubling in the first root letter. So there's the dagesh. So the prefix of the imperfect has been taken off. This hey has appeared along with the hirik from the nifal, the I, and there's now a dagesh there because the noon has been pushed inside. Again, the same endings from the second person, because the imperative only occurs in the second person. These are all the second person endings from the imperfect. Here's PL, spelled exactly the same as the imperfect, except we've lost the front prefix. The hit pile, again, the prefix of the imperfect has been removed. The hit has reappeared. You might remember that the hit pile in the imperfect, the hey disappears and the prefix is put on the front. Now that we've taken the prefix off, the hey reappears and we're left with just the imperfect endings. And then we have the hifil. The hey normally disappears in the imperfect when we put the tavs on the front. We remove the tavs and we are left with the hey reappearing and the endings from the imperfect. Notice that we have a shortening of the vowel here in the second masculine singular that's similar to the jussive. In all the others, the hirik yod, or in just the second feminine singular, second masculine plural, the hirik yod is still there, but we get a shortening again in the second feminine plural. So the imperative is built off the imperfect. We lose the prefix, and sometimes the prefix of the binyanim reappears. These verbs are sometimes followed by na. We've learned this word. It means something similar to please in English. Let's take a look at an example from 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 13. Va'ata deber na el ha-melech. And now speak, please, unto the king. So here we have the imperative form. This is PL. So look at our PL chart up here. and it looks very similar to what we have here. But we have a vowel change because it is being joined with na. The accent has moved over to na, which shortens our vowel in this syllable. So instead of the tsere, we have the segel. De bear na is the imperative, and the na just simply could be translated as please. So instead of the imperative being a command here, this is expressing a wish. So lesson 39, we learned about the jussives and the imperatives, both of which express commands or wishes, both of which are built off of the imperfect. For the jussive, we add a onto the end, and in the second and third person in the hifil and some weak verbs, we shorten our vowels. The imperative looks exactly like the jussive, which is to say it looks very similar to the imperfect, except for we just strip off the prefix from the front. So here are two new conjugations. They appear in all binyanim, and they express command or wishes.